we do have a group presentation today, a joint partnership opportunity for training today between the National Association of Development Organizations, Research Foundation, and NeighborWorks America. So thanks for joining us today. I know we kind of have two different audiences here, but that's kind of the point of today's conversation, is to get everyone together who are working on the ground in local and rural communities. Get together and learn about what each other are doing, and like the PowerPoint says, building partnerships and building homes. So thanks everyone for joining in today. We're going to give it maybe just 30 more seconds for folks to trickle in, and then we'll get started. So thanks again. All right, folks, I think we've hit a kind of a critical mass here in participation, so thanks for your patience. We're going to go ahead and get started today. And if you missed it from the start, this is a joint training opportunity presented both by the NADO Research Foundation as well as NeighborWorks America. So glad to have everybody on the call, a good diverse audience I saw from the registration list, good mix of both EDDs and NeighborWorks affiliate organizations. So excited to have everyone on the call. Just to give you a quick rundown of what we're going to do today. My name is Andrew Coker. I'm a program manager at the NADO Research Foundation. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do at NADO and maybe some ways that those in the NeighborWorks audience can plug into some of the work that we do. And then I'm going to hand it off to Sarah Kakar on the call, who's the Director of Rural Initiatives for NeighborWorks America. Sarah's going to talk more about what NeighborWorks does, and then we're going to have a kind of open-ended conversation, presentations with Jay Trusty and Harrison Kanzler on the call, who are both practitioners in the field. Jay working in Minnesota at Southwestern Minnesota Development Commission, and then Harrison Kanzler at Ahead Incorporated out of New Hampshire. So we'll get to hear both sides of the house. Jay providing the EDD's perspective on some ways that EDDs and NeighborWorks affiliate organizations can interact, and then Harrison from his perspective as a nonprofit housing community development organization, how he's interacted with his EDD in his region, North Country Council. So just to get going here, we do have about an hour and a half on the presentations today, so buckle in. We've got a good afternoon for you, and I'm going to go ahead and get started talking kind of about what NADO is, if you're not familiar. So NADO, the National Association of Development Organizations, you can kind of see we break up into kind of two sides of the house, as we like to call it. The side on the left, really the advocacy, training, membership organization side of the house. So traditional trade association made up of regional planning organizations. You may have heard the term Planning and Development District, Regional Planning Commission, Council of Governments, Development Commission. The names are all across the board, but they all kind of promote regional strategies, partnerships, and solutions to strengthen economic competitiveness and quality of life. So lots of different names, but all one central mission, and that's kind of the membership of the National Association of Development Organizations. On the fun side of the house, the NADO Research Foundation, as I like to call it, we're really kind of the research, education, and training arm of the place. So we provide the webinar today, as well as several different education and training opportunities for regional planners around economic development, community development, transportation, hazard mitigation, the list goes on. So really that sharing network across the membership of NADO, as well as EDDs across the country. Just talking about a few different resources that are available for everyone on the call today, especially on the EDD side of the house. These will be pretty relevant. Definitely encourage everyone to check out our SEDS Central website. This is the #1 repository for SEDS information across the country. You can go to EDA's website, of course, but I think we've got the next best thing in terms of resources, best practices, and kind of that 101, maybe information sharing repository. Along with that, we also have one of our largest programs to date that's produced the most resources and most information is our Economic Development District Community of Practice. This program is really meant to hone down in on the economic development districts role. And what are they doing across the country, again, to boost economic competitiveness, promote quality of life, promote economic growth in their regions. So please encourage you to check out our website at nato.org/EDDCOP. Lots of great resources on there, lots of great videos, webinar recordings, trainings, different tools, tip sheets, all sorts of stuff in there relevant to both EDDs as well as some of the NeighborWorks folks on the call as well. With that, I also have our interactive EDD map, which is available at nato.org/EDDmap. You can go in and find any EDD service area across the country, as well as a link to their live SEDS and website. With that, I am going to unveil a new tool that we've created today. Happy to share some of this information out. Building off of that live map I showed of the EDD service areas, we've developed a new tool today using some data provided by the NeighborWorks America organization, and I'll pull that new map up here in just a second. We have gone in and created a mapping tool that shows not only EDD service area, but as well NeighborWorks affiliate organizations. So you can kind of see where that crossover is in your region. I can kind of display one example here real quick. Let's see. I guess we can go to Jay's region, which will be an easy one, considering they're located in the same building, in the same area. Just showing off some of the functionalities of the tool. You can see if you select a region, you can see Southwest Regional Development Commission. You can see the service areas and counties, links to their SEDS and links to their website. If you wanted to perhaps find an organization, a NeighborWorks affiliate organization, you can go and select one of the orange diamonds, and it will show you the name of the organization, the city and state that they operate in, as well as a link to the website. Selecting this feature right here will also show you, okay, these are the overlaps in service areas between EDDs as well as NeighborWorks affiliate organization offices. So can select back and forth, and hopefully this tool will be useful for everyone as we're building out some of these partnerships at the local level. And I'll go back to our presentation here. Right.
And Andrew, if I could really quickly also, those points of NeighborWorks organizations are where they are headquartered, and organizations often have service areas that many times cover up to entire state. So 12 counties, 20 counties, up to a state. So we think that there is a lot of potential overlap there, even beyond where those orange points are. And then in areas where there may not be an EDD, it doesn't mean there's not a regional or a statewide economic development function. Those are, maybe in metropolitan planning districts, they might be in regional development councils, so it might not be a specific EDD, but there's still regional and state economic development planning. So I know, Andrew, you had said NATO's got resources to, or ideas of who might be able to cover some of those areas that are in the way.
Definitely, yeah. And if you don't see, if you're a NeighborWorks organization and you're not served by an EDD directly in your service area or where your office is located, definitely feel free to check out the websites of some of the other organizations in your state. Typically, EDD service areas do cover just the counties that are listed and designated by EDA, but they do have some programs here and there that are outside of their own service area. So definitely, if you're not covered by one, definitely feel free to check out the ones in your state just to make sure. And as Sarah said as well, your state Department of Commerce also has functionality similar to an EDD that may be able to assist with some of this work that you do. Getting on to a few different kind of housekeeping items at NATO, we do have a couple of events coming up, major events coming up. On the national scale, we have our 2025 National Regional Transportation Conference, which is coming up July 15th through 17th. That's going to be in Des Moines, Iowa. Then we have the 2025 NATO Annual Training Conference, ATC as we call it. Kind of the biggest event of our year, over 500 folks coming together, typically, everyone at regional organizations, economic developers, state policymakers, everyone across the gambit kind of what we do. So it's a great convening, a great national conference, and a great place to kind of come and share ideas with the national network. So with that, I'll go ahead and wrap up my portion of the day and give everybody at EDDs who've heard this conversation or heard this presentations 20 times, give everyone a chance to learn something new. And I'm going to hand it over to Sarah Kakar on the call, who's the Director of Rural Initiatives at NeighborWorks America. So thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Really appreciate it. And thank you so much for coming today to join this conversation. NATO and NeighborWorks, we've had conversations for years. Andrew's colleague, Brett Schwartz, and I have known each other and been colleagues for years. And it's been something that I've had a chance to speak to some NATO audiences, both during COVID and then also live in person. And it was something that we just really said that this would be a great opportunity to bring NATO resources and the economic development lens to our organizations who are really some of the strongest affordable housing and community development corporations in the country. So again, my name is Sarah Kakar. I'm the National Director of Rural, or we call it the Rural Initiative here at NeighborWorks.
There, you actually switched off to mute there.
Okay, somehow I got muted. There we are. I want to introduce my colleague who's joining me today, Elena K. Sheese, and she and I run all of the rural national programs for NeighborWorks and for the rural half of our network. And so now I'm going to just give you a little bit of an intro into NeighborWorks if you haven't heard of us or our network. And for those NeighborWorks folks on the line, like with Andrew and his folks, you've probably seen or heard these slides a couple times, so bear with me for a few minutes before we get to the really good stuff of Harrison and Jay and your questions. So I'm just going to share super fast and we will get moving on. Okay, so let's see how fast that these can move through the slides. Let's try to advance see if the slides will go. Here we go. So NeighborWorks, we are a nationally appropriated nonprofit. We're in our 46th year here in 2025, and we are a national intermediary. So that it means that we do receive a congressional appropriation, which we pass through a lion's share, most of that to the network of organizations that we have. We have nearly 250 organizations covering rural, suburban, and urban geographies in every state, plus DC and Puerto Rico. Our mission really is to create communities of opportunity. So living in the affordable homes, having community support, social networks, and really in the end, strengthening their communities. We offer capacity building programs. We have a training arm. If you haven't heard of my NeighborWorks Training Institute, it is something to behold. It's probably the largest trainer in the community development and affordable housing space. We've hold some training institutes twice a year with a couple thousand people at each of those. And that's where you can take courses and certification as well as really make connections across the field. So we, in addition to community capacity training, we support in housing counseling, real estate development. We have lenders, probably 250 organizations in our network, about 80 to 90 are CDFIs, community development finance institutions, and about half of those are rural. Half of these 250 work primarily in the rural space, so it's about 121 right now. However, when we take into account those groups who are more suburban and urban, who have also moved into rural and they do service rural areas, it's up to probably about 3/4 of our network. So we touch rural in a very big way. And it is our pleasure and our mission to really help continue to strengthen organizations, as I said, through capacity building, but also board governance activities, through grant programs, through peer connection programs, and peer-to-peer collaborations. We really are here to connect and to serve our network. Here's a sample of some of our activities. Each of our organizations are different in size and scope and what lines of business that they serve. However, these are really some of the key activities that you'll see our organizations serving. As you notice, many of these are in not only affordable housing development and lending, also economic development space, community development space, small business, trainings, everything that often results in some of our organizations playing a community quarterback role. Whether it is in a very small area where they really, our organization is the one who does all of this plus more. They might have childcare. They might also have food banks, whatever, or homeless shelters. They often are the organization that is looked to. And so it is for this reason that we wanted you NADO members to sort of know and understand, if you already haven't had the chance to engage with network members from the NeighborWorks network, just so you see some of the great work that they're doing, and that they are here in so many ways in your communities, and they are a partner ready and willing to work with you. So at a very high level, this is some of the impact of NeighborWorks. This is from fiscal year 2024. So as I mentioned, of the appropriation, a lion's share of that goes through in grant funding to be distributed to our approximately 250 organizations. That is then leveraged with a 71-to-1 leverage ratio of other public and private funds by our organizations to create more than an $11 billion impact in the communities. We provide, as I mentioned, the technical assistance, and that can take many different forms, whether individualized, a TA, where we might have a cohort of organizations that we basically bring subject matter experts on for an organization to work with on whatever area they feel that they need more assistance in. Or it could be a broader, something like a peer exchange trip. So we might bring 5 to 10 organizations around a specific topic to a place to spend a couple days really immersing themselves, learning and asking questions. In the training and leadership development space, I mentioned some of that in the affordable housing community development world, we are one of the largest, and especially in home ownership counselors, financial capability, counseling, and everything around home ownership and lending. So when you come to one of those NTIs, either in person or at a virtual NTI, so we call them a VTI, which also happen a couple times a year, you can get training certificates for your professional certifications. And lastly, something that makes our network a little different than some other networks out there of our peer intermediaries with whom we actually have really close relationships, like a Rural Lisk or an Enterprise or an Habitat, who you might know. We really have a deep business intelligence and organizational assessment capability. So to the, I guess, chagrin of some of our organizations, we have quarterly reporting. And this is something that we ask a lot of questions, because we collect the data and then we put it out in forms, whether it's individualized or it's mass across the network in the field to our network, so that they can use that, whether it's there in their storytelling or their work with representatives or officials. But it's something that collecting that data not only helps us understand, but helps us translate again into what kind of programs do we need to be running? What do we need to make sure that our organizations are the strongest, most sustainable, and most resilient organizations possible in the field? So maybe Harrison might touch on that in his place, but maybe not. It's definitely something that is, it takes a little time, but we really try to use that data to make sure that the network organizations realize benefit from it. And generally in the rural initiative, right before I finish here, we have 121 organizations, as I mentioned, who are primarily rural. we date back quite a while. Informally, our rural groups were connecting in the 80s, but the rural initiatives was formalized 25 years ago. So it's not a new initiative, but we still call ourselves the Rural Initiative, and we work in many different areas, right? So we're really a strategy or a lens that through which all of NeighborWorks lines of businesses can see themselves and can apply their work in a rural space. So that's all I've got for now. I did put my contact here just to make sure that anyone can reach out to me or Andrew. But what I want to do right now is most immediately pass it to Harrison Kanzler, who is the executive director of AHEAD in New Hampshire and serves about half of the state of New Hampshire. He also is one of the co-leaders of our National Rural Advisory Council of Rural Leaders that we have to really lead in both in policy and in every space for our entire network. So with that, I'm pleased to introduce Harrison, and I'll stop my share and send it over to you.
Thanks so much. So let me get mine up. And while I'm doing that, I can confirm that those reports are a lot of fun to do on a quarterly basis. But they serve a great purpose. And as a result of NeighborWorks capturing all of that information, it really gives us a robust housing data set on a national wide level that we can really bring to leverage conversations in our state around housing. So that's been super helpful. So it's worth the effort. My name is Harrison Kanzler. I'm the executive director for AHEAD, which is an acronym for Affordable Housing, Education, and Development. And I have to write that out on every grant that I do, which is a lot of fun. So I just want to level set real quick, just give an explanation as to what AHEAD is, who we are, and what we do, and just general scope and scale. I try to understand that some of the things I might talk about or projects I might talk about aren't going to fit for smaller groups that have different capacity levels. So I just want to make sure we understand kind of what AHEAD is so that you can kind of look at it comparably there. So we are a 501c3 CHODO organization, and that's a Community Housing Development Organization. It's a HUD designation that we have through the federal government. We've been around for a little over 30 years. And as Sarah said, we do service like somewhere between 40 and 50% of the state geographically. Of course, if you're familiar with working in a rural space, you know that even though we're covering 40 to 50% of the state geographically, we're covering about 5 to 10% of the state's population over that geography, which is a challenge in and of itself, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So our three major lines of business are development, and I mean property development. Obviously, I just came from kind of a philanthropy conference, and they're talking about development in a whole different way. We also do property management. So we do manage our portfolio as well as do third-party management. So we manage stuff for other owners. And then we also have a home ownership department. And I know that the O in home ownership isn't capitalized normally, but that's not AHEAD, that's NeighborWorks branding. So we stick with it. So our home ownership department, if you're not familiar with what a home ownership does, essentially our home ownership department has certified HUD housing counselors, and they do things like offer first-time homebuyer education, which is separate from being and practicing real estate. They also do budget counseling for people one-on-one. They do foreclosure counseling one-on-one with people. They also do credit, health, and finance education. And we do that as one-on-one counseling. We also do it as kind of group classes or lessons, either in person or online. So that's something that we have done in the past with employers we've met through SEDS, is we'll actually have a home ownership team member go to an employer and provide a training to the staff on site. And that's all totally free. It's covered by funding we get through the federal government mostly. AHEAD as an affordable housing group, we have about 27 properties, and that turns into about 513 units when you break it down. We are northern New Hampshire, also demographically is one of the oldest parts of the country. And so about half of that, about 260 of our units are age restricted units, which means they're for folks who are 63 or older, or who have disability. So a fair chunk of our portfolio is basically 1-bedroom apartments because they're geared for older adults. And then as far as like the size of what it takes to make all this work, we've got about 36 full-time employees on our staff. So what do those 36 people do? About 26 of them work in property management. And this is a map of northern New Hampshire. This pretty much covers our portfolio. And all those dots there are properties that we manage. And you can see, I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, but in the top portion of the map, we call this our northern portfolio. And from this dot to this dot is just about an hour. From this one to this one's just about an hour. Yes, those are closer, but as we say in New England, you can't get there from here. So it's one of those things where you have to kind of, drive all the way up here and then come down this way. But needless to say, we kind of have to have staff stationed here and here and here because in emergent purposes, it doesn't make sense to have someone driving an hour distance to get there. And to get from here all the way down to our southernmost property here, somewhere around 2 hours and change driving. So these are quite spread apart. It's much more easily managed when we're looking at our clusters here, which is where our offices are in Littleton, or down here we have a clustering of properties in a town called Lisbon. But those are, just to manage this takes the vast majority of our staff. It's about 2/3 of our overall budget. It's also more than that as far as our revenue. So this is really, what a head does. These little dots minimize it so much, but this is really the main focus of everything that we do. But another thing that I do, and a big part of my job, is making sure that in a rural space, we are establishing key partnerships as to ensuring that our properties are being well managed, that our residents have access to adequate services, and to make sure that we have a robust development pipeline because we want to make sure that we're continually either economically or housing wise developing within our region. And in a rural area, again, if you're working in the rural space, you know how important these partnerships are. So many times trying to go after, especially federal funding, rural always looks smaller on paper, looks like it has less impact on paper. And so when you can say this is a joint application or here are letters of support from, other groups that service a large geographic area, it just makes things that much easier when you can work together. And so one of the, predominantly our relationships have been with local service providers, healthcare providers. Obviously, as I said, we have that 513 apartments. I think it equates to near 800 residents in total that live in HUD properties. And so we want to make sure that they have access to any social services or medical services that they would need. But we didn't surprisingly have that much connection with the economic development that was going on in the region. I think it's been much more in the past, kind of 5 years or so that there has been kind of the clear conversation that housing development and economic development kind of go hand in hand. And so we've really been building out what that partnership looks like. And so we kind of joined up with and started working with our SEDS, who, as Andrew noted, is a group called North Country Council. And the partnership has been fantastic. We've been doing an immense amount of work with them. And I don't want to get ahead of myself, so I'm going to advance the slide and I might backtrack a little bit. Okay, good. So our SEDS is run by North Country Council. It's one of these small world pieces where we started looking into, okay, who do we talk to? I started going to economic development conferences in the state and started realizing, oh, well, one of our tenants in our building is North Country Council. So it was pretty easy to make that connection because they're, just across the street, kind of down the road in one of our properties is where their offices are. So we started establishing more regular meetings with them and getting a better feel for what programs and studies and research they were working on. and then we started being more forward really about the work that we were doing and kind of lifting the veil a little bit about our pipeline, which is not necessarily something we always share publicly, but we started working a bit more closely with them. And we really began having conversations around also cross-pollination. And so we actually now have a seat on our board, which is kind of softly reserved for North Country Council. So we make sure that they're always kind of at those meetings, they're on the board. They had the individual who was on our board from North Country Council actually left and went to a new position. And so we just said, hey, we're securing this seat for you. The board agreed that that was the right move to make. And so we got a new member from North Country Council to join our board, and that has been instrumental in making sure that this partnership stays afloat. So one of the things that is huge, as we talked about earlier, I have a bunch of housing data. They had all the economic data. And so we're able to really weave that together and make like really compelling stories that are supported by data around what the needs for our region are, what they look like, and that really helps drive potential solutions. And we'll come back to that later because it's always fun to talk about solutions and not just problems. So we really benefited from learning more about economic development. And another thing that it did is we saw a lot of the major employers in the region were part of SEDS. And obviously this kind of employer assisted piece has become employer assisted housing has become a big focus. And we've also, so we've tried to be more engaged with them. And SEDS the SEDS of North Country Council was just like a fantastic kind of fertile soil for us to really meet and make those connections, start having those conversations, and be able to get direct feedback, sitting around a table from all of the major employers as far as, what demographic are you looking for? Realistically, if I'm building housing that's targeted to this income bracket, is that actually going to help you? Because that's a really important conversation for rural spaces. And so that's led to a couple things, and that we'll start with failure. And that I just realized how red that screen is. It's kind of like reflecting off me. But so I'll talk first. And this was honestly, it was our first crack through SEDS. We got paired up with a group called LIDC, the Littleton Industrial Development Coalition. And they had a parcel of land in Littleton that they were doing a industrial park phase 2 development on. And it was a cohort of employers, and through SEDS, they had their project was being vetted by SEDS. It was getting approval by them and getting letters of recommendation. And so we ended up having a meeting through that and saying, well, hey, what if part of your lot had housing on it? And then that way you've got, kind of this employer. And so we were approaching the employer assisted housing in the sense that early on in the development, if we set land aside for us, that would have come through as a donation. That makes it much easier for us to build housing. And obviously that housing is prime now for folks who are working in that industrial park. And we had conversations. This was back and forth, and we had some planning, some, mild engineering done, some environmental studies done. I mean, these conversations were going on for several months, and I would say that probably somewhere between $10,000 and $15,000 worth of pre-development work, which is not as much as you would think, went into looking at this. And as it happened, LIDC had a bucket of money from a group called the Northern Border Regional Commission, which we'll talk about in a second. And we had an earmark from our federal delegation from one of our senators for a community funded project. And so we said, well, let's pool this together and get the infrastructure put in, and then we can start putting things down. Well, what is unfortunate is that all of the estimates for the infrastructure were pre-COVID, because this conversation on LIDC's part was going on for a long time. And so the money we had, actually, we thought we were going to be able to put in, 1.5 miles of infrastructure. And well, no, actually, you could probably put in about, maybe a 0.5 mile of infrastructure, probably less than that. And so what that did was very quickly alter where this development could go, the housing development could go on the land. And it became very quickly apparent that that was not going to be a viable option for the industrial park moving forward, because it would have soaked up essentially what was some of the prime industrial land for the housing. And the whole point was to use the less prime industrial land for the housing. So it ended up kind of falling apart, but it was a great exercise, and it ended up being worth its weight, just in the sense of, you know, working through that partnership and seeing how it would go. But there were successes. I had a total tone change there when I got away from that red slide, and so I will just give you some positives, right? So where were some other things? Well, through these conversations, and I'm sure this is similar for you all, we also found that if employers were not talking about how badly they needed housing, they were talking about how badly they needed childcare. And so AHEAD, was involved with North Country Council at this time. We were going to the meetings, and we had done presentations on housing. And then we started pivoting and having conversations around childcare and brought in childcare groups. And as a result, myself and one of the members of North Country Council started going to some childcare specific conferences together. And sure enough, we ended up through work with North Country Council, got connected with a group, nonprofit childcare provider called the Gorham Community Learning Center. They wanted to expand. They had the resources, the staffing, everything, and there were two properties for sale, both one directly across the street from their current location, the other about a 2-minute drive down the road. They said either one of these would be great, but we don't know what we're doing. We're not developers. We're not into real estate. Would you just be willing to come walk through these sites with us and generally give us your feedback? And so we as developers said, absolutely, we're happy to do that. And we gave them a real hard and fast no on the first building. And then when we got to the second building, we said, you know what, this could work. We think this could work. And we started talking to them about, this is outside of your wheelhouse, but here's where we would go to get all of the money for this. And they said, well, you're the experts. Can you work with us? And can you bring this across the finish line? And we'll own it. We're not going to make you manage the property or anything, but we'll pay you kind of a consulting fee to do this. And so we formed an official partnership with the Gorham Community Learning Center. Again, the North Country Council provided a lot of the application support as far as the workforce data, the economic data that we needed in order to really put together this application that we did through the Northern Border Regional Commission. That's a federally established funding commission that is for economic development. And so again, it's something we'd used a lot before my time, and it's something that in fact, we were just having with the Rural Initiative leadership a conversation the other day about how we're starting to see more pivoting happening towards this economic development money, because it tends to be more flexible and it can be involved in projects like this. And so us as developers can utilize that. And so we put in an application for Gorham Community Learning Center with support from North Country Council and AHEAD, and we were able to secure $1 million grant to begin this process. We also did a community development block grant for acquisition costs for the property. And then there's going to be some private philanthropic dollars in there, as well as some financing. And what we're doing in this project is it's this bank building that was built in the 1990s, and they've shut the bank branch down, and it's in nice shape. I mean, it was a bank. It's pretty light use, got ample parking. And we're creating, in fact, so much parking that we're turning some of that into a playground and blocking it off. And so this is an adaptive reuse project that's going to just about double the allocation of childcare slots that this provider has. And they're one of the most affordable in the region. So it's really going to bring about really just a huge amount of access to childcare for people in the region, which is fantastic. This project, this is actively ongoing right now. We were just talking to banks about financing today, and we're hoping to be breaking ground in the next month or so on getting this project started. So this one is really exciting. And again, something that was kind of born out of this merger of housing and economic development conversations. And another one is we were approached by again, a philanthropic partner for the region who said, we really want to get involved with housing and economic development. And so a head in North Country Council were brought to the table in kind of an advisory capacity to build out a programmatic, a kind of a programmatic roadmap of how funding could be best allocated in the region. And like I talked about, it was that kind of shared narrative of the housing and the economy and the data that we were both able to bring together that created what became known as this Homes North New Hampshire program. It's bringing in $8.8 million of private funding into the region for housing and economic development. Part of that became established as partnership sustainability grants. So both AHEAD and North Country Council, as well as other organizations who apply for it, get access to unrestricted operating capital, which is obviously huge for the housing and economic development group for the area. It also, we're working right now on finalizing part of a program that will be developing low interest development loans for both housing and economic development projects. That will happen on a regional basis. So just for our northern region there, we'll have access to some low interest programs, which would be fantastic. And then also it led to, in conversations around economic development and in this conversation of, again, workforce and housing, we had those conversations with North Country Council, with all the employers at the table, and said, well, what do you need? What is the staff that's missing? And so much we heard that it was really the more mid to higher tier staff, your certified, your skilled labor, your certified folks, people who have college degrees and backgrounds in whatever they're doing, licenses, certifications, you name it. And so we created a Pathways to Homeownership Down Payment Assistance Program through this as well. That was helped shaped by AHEAD in North Country Council. And what that does is it provides a 5% down payment assistance for folks who are working in the area. And just to give you an idea of the workforce we were targeting, we have to date, I believe, done 26 home sales through this down payment assistance program. And we have been tracking what roles these folks fill within the region. And so this is a scatter shot of all of the jobs that are being essentially sustained and secured through getting these people out of apartments where, again, from the housing study part of it, we say they're more likely to move. They're much more transient, usually 3 to 5 years, and into home ownership, which is typically much more static person within the community and is typically not going to sell their home until like more of a 7 to 12 year period. So this is about workforce sustainability and getting these folks, as you can see, mental health, preschool teachers, firefighters, bank tellers, electricians. It's kind of the soup du jour of what people are in rural spaces say we need in our communities. So this has been a huge success for that program. And I wasn't timing myself, but I know I tend to go long, so I'm going to say that I'm done there. My contact information, and I will turn it. I don't know if I don't remember if I'm supposed to take questions now or turn it over.
Yeah.
So
we'll do questions at the end. So thank you, Harrison,
okay.
for the stuff there. And I'm just really impressed to see. I think this is such a great example of what the SEDS is really meant to be at the regional level, is a convening place where interested parties, interested people, stakeholders, practitioners come together and then really figure out what assets they have as a region and then how they can really kind of strategically deploy those assets using the information and data they have. So thank you, Harrison. And I think that'd be a great ad for the SEDS right there, just that presentation about how all those people can come together and get stuff done. So thank you again. And as I mentioned earlier, we will take questions at the end for both Jay and for Harrison. And as Sarah's putting in the chat, we are going to share the recording and the materials with everyone. So feel free to check out some of the links and some of the slides of the presentations afterwards when you get a chance. I did want to mention as well, before hand it off to Jay, if you're on our EDD mailing list, which all the EDDs on this call should be, NADO just recently sent out a collection of our housing resources that are available to EDDs just this morning. So very opportune time for us. Feel free to check that out in your inbox. It should kind of come from an email address called EDD Community of Practice. In that email, I included a little short, 500 words, just my thoughts on what's happening in housing and economic development space. And I included something that made me think of something Harrison mentioned from Northern Kentucky Area Development District's Director, Tara Johnson Nome. She mentioned in a quote, homes are where jobs live, which I think is a great way to think about that connection between housing and your regional economies. So thank you again, Harrison. Great stuff. Always happy to have you on the call. Now I'm going to hand it over to Jay Trusty, Southwestern Regional Development Commission's Executive Director in Southwestern Minnesota. Jay has the great opportunity to share about how some of these partnerships can be built and maintained from the Economic Development District perspective. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Jay. Thank you.
All right, here. Thank you, Andrew. We're going to keep this shared here. I hope. All right, that should set us up. So good afternoon, everybody. As Andrew said, I'm Jay Trusty. I'm the Executive Director of the Southwest Regional Development Commission in Southwest Minnesota. We cover the 9 counties in the southwest corner, bordering both South Dakota and Iowa. And we serve 9 counties, 80 cities, 162 townships, and portions of 32 independent school districts. I've been the executive director since 2001, and we're going to go a little bit different direction than what Harrison did. He kind of covered the SEDS and a lot of the work that we do as a regional development organization. But I'm going to kind of talk about going back a little bit and how we first developed the Southwest Minnesota Housing Partnership in our neck of the woods, and how that development was really spurred by the Regional Development Commission and some of the other agencies that already existed within the region. So you can see our mission there, providing professional expertise and leadership to enhance regional opportunities. Oftentimes organizations will spend a lot of time coming up with their purpose or their vision. For us, the Regional Development Commissions in Minnesota were developed after the legislature in 1969 passed the Minnesota Regional Development Act. And so our purpose is defined in Minnesota statute as to work with and on behalf of local units of government to develop plans or implement programs to address economic, social, physical, and governmental concerns. Now, when I give this presentation and I talk about our statutory purpose to elected officials, I always tell them what that basically means is I've been doing this a long time. I have yet to find something that doesn't fit either economic, social, physical, or governmental concern. So the statute gives us the authority to work on whatever our local elected officials want us to prioritize. And that's the key to regional development commissions in Minnesota anyway, is that our governing boards are made up of county commissioners, city council members, township officials, and school board members, and some at-large folks that are defined in our statute. So the local government input is key to how this stuff works in our regions. And just so you know what the Housing Partnerships mission is, as we kind of delve into that world a little bit, they partner with communities to develop places for people to call home. It's short, it's simple, it's very easy to remember, and your elevator speech is quick and easy. Forming the partnership. So this is where we get a little bit interesting, and probably why I got the call from Andrew and Sarah to see if I would be available for this. In 1992, Rick Goodman, who would be a name that the housing folks probably, if you've been around a while, would remember, brought together 3 community action agencies in Southwest Minnesota and our agency to form the Southwest Minnesota Housing Partnership. So the partnership itself was our 4 agencies, and our 4 agencies capitalized the initial organization. This is, like I said, this was in 92, a long time ago. When I started in 2001, the organizational structure was still at the board level, that there were 2 representatives from each of the founding agencies. So that would be 8 and 7 at-large members. It was designed that way so that the 4 agencies that capitalized the partnership would always have a majority of the board members in case something went south. But as we went forward, I was actually still on the board. I was on the board for 14 years, and I was on the board when NeighborWorks came in, and when we decided as an organization that we wanted to pursue that, and to really change over to be much more of an independent agency under the auspices of NeighborWorks and how their organizational recommendations were. So in the beginning, the RDC and the Southwest Minnesota Housing Partnership were co-located in a building downtown Slayton. For those of you who don't know where downtown Slayton is, it's right in the middle of my region, and it has about 1,900 people in it. So we are not a very large community, but we are centrally located and right at the intersection of 2 main highways. So in 1996, we built a building together. We put a new addition on in 2006. Keep in mind that the population of Slayton, back in the day, before COVID and before some of these other things happened, we still had the aging program. There were 50 professional people working in our building, about 25 at the RDC and about 25 at the Housing Partnership. So we had 50 mostly degreed positions in a town of less than 1,900 people. So we were very impactful. You can see our building there. It's called the Center for Regional Development. And right behind us, our 504C lender was also in a separate building right behind us. So if you were in the region and you wanted to do economic, housing, or business development, you came to us. And we were all centrally located. Initially, the SRDC provided all the staff support to the Housing Partnership. They had 2 staff. They had an executive director and 1 other staff person. We did their finance. We did their admin. We have on and off through the years actually shared grant writing opportunities. For a long time, we did the Small Cities Development Program grant writing for them under contract. We still have a contract to this day with them for some admin things. We share the building. We have a lease to own with the city. They have a sublease with us, and they'll, as of next year, they'll end up owning part of the building and we'll own the rest. And we share all of our IT infrastructure, our storage, all of our electronics, our copying capacity, any of that that we generate is all shared so that we can spread the cost of that among the agencies. As the agencies grew, separate finance staff became very important for the Housing Partnership. You know, when there's only a couple of staff, it's pretty easy to run payroll through our system. But as the employee grew, and you just need to have your own finance staff, and audits start becoming an issue. And then the Housing Partnership opened a second office in Mankato. And here I'm going to stop and talk a little bit about some odd things that kind of spurred the growth of the Housing Partnership. In 1992, when the Housing Partnership formed, about a month after the formation of the partnership, an F5 tornado came through the communities of Chandler and Lake Wilson, which is only about 10, 12 miles from our offices in Slayton, and pretty much wiped those 2 communities off the map. The Housing Partnership was very instrumental in helping those communities to rebuild, and they really got their feet under them in an emergency situation with things that needed to be done. And the Regional Development Commission and the Housing Partnership worked closely in those days to just do whatever they could to get our communities back on their feet. And then I say here that the Housing Partnership opened their second office in Mankato. And that's probably as a direct result of the St. Peter tornado, which came through about 10 years ago now, I suppose, and really did a devastating job to the housing market in St. Peter and in that part of the region. And so we started sending a lot of staff over that way again. So as we've grown, I cover 9 counties, and the Housing Partnership, and we'll look at the original map here, the Housing Partnership originally covered 18 counties. And now they have services in about 33 counties and a couple of projects in Iowa that they service as well. So here's the Southwest Minnesota Housing Partnership service area. So you can kind of see we're, like I said, we're right up against South Dakota and Iowa. For those of you who are unfamiliar with anything outside of Minneapolis in Minnesota, which is fine, there's a lot of folks know Minneapolis, and that's about it. Our major metropolitan area in our region is not Minneapolis. It's actually Sioux Falls, South Dakota. That's where our healthcare comes out of. That's where transportation hub is. So if you're in Southwest Minnesota and you're looking for those kind of options, you typically would go to Sioux Falls before you would go to Minneapolis, because it's just too far away to get to the metropolitan area. You'll notice on the map that Andrew showed earlier, there's a white space there that kind of surrounds, it kind of goes up that corridor to the right there between Rochester, St. Cloud, and Minneapolis. That's mostly the urban corridor in Minnesota. And is not covered by Regional Development Commission. And the reason I call this interconnectedness, and Harrison did a really good job of talking about housing and daycare, and you'll see I've got the same things. As we all know, all of these things are connected. And especially in the rural areas, we can't afford to be in our silos just doing things individually. So economic development in our region means more people. When I say that it means more people, I'm purely talking numbers of bodies. We cover just about 7,000 square miles. We have about 115,000 people. Right now, according to the latest statistics from the state, we have about 2.5 jobs for every available person. And that's not even counting qualifications. That's just pure body numbers. So where your typical economic development agency is out chasing employers, we're not chasing employers. We have employers, we have jobs, we need people to fill them. And so, especially in the last 10 years or so, that has really changed the vision of what economic development in rural areas meant. We've had a lot of out-migration in our region and a lot of aging in place. A couple of my counties are the oldest counties, or among the oldest counties in Minnesota. I've got a county where the 2 primary sources of revenue are Social Security and cash transfer payments, which is cash rent for land. And so regularly generated income is not their means, because most of the population is over 60. And so where that demographic trend has started for us, and we're seeing some of that in the other areas of Minnesota and in other parts of the country, we hit that early. So we're looking at unemployment rates right now at about 2.1. I had a county, Rock County, in the far southwest corner, with an unemployment rate below 1 last summer. It's really hard to promote economic development and attract businesses when you don't have people. And if you have people, they need a place to live. So if you want to attract people, you got to give them a place to live. And then when they get there, they want daycare. Imagine that. They want to have kids. They want to have a family. If they're moving to a rural area from a metro area, that's part of the attraction. Broadband is another big thing. We do a lot of work around broadband, try and make sure that there's broadband access throughout the region, because then you can attract folks from more urban areas who are able to work anywhere. If you don't have access to broadband, you can't attract those people. You can't get their families. You can't get those housing and daycare. Everything is connected. And then, of course, community amenities. You need to have parks. You need to have trails. I think if COVID taught us anything, especially the outdoor recreational things are important for people. When they can't see other people, they need to get out. They need to do things. And so all of these things are connected. And as Harrison does such a great job of pursuing with the SEDS, that's exactly how this is all integrated and integrated into the housing world. So one of the things that we do, and like I said, I sat on the board of the Housing Partnership for 14 years. I still sit on about 28 or 29 boards of directors for limited liability partnerships on specific projects. It's handy because I'm right in the building and I can sign things. So I tend to be the treasurer on a lot of projects so that we can get things signed and get new bank things and everything handled. So one of the projects that we do that kind of shows how we can work together is the Minnesota Cities Participation Program. It's a program funded by the state that was initially designed for cities to give first-time homebuyer loans through the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency. One of our communities, the city of Worthington, did apply for the funding, but they could never get enough of the funding out. So we were asked by the state to be the applicant agency. And as a special purpose local unit of government, we qualified as a municipality under the legislative language. And so we could be the applicant. The Housing Partnership does actually almost all the work, does all the marketing, does the lender training. All we have to do is be the applicant. And so as of the end of May of this year, we've been doing this project about 10 years now. As at the end of May, we got allocated $2 million and we've $2.5 million committed. So we're at 117% of our usage for the year. So as the project goes forward, we'll probably finish right around that 200%, pick up some stuff that some of the other participants are not going to be using their program allotments. And so we've been a very successful program in this. The structure of individual projects. When I was talking with Andrew, we kind of said, well, can we kind of walk through how one of these things works where you work together on something? And we're going to go on a little bit of a side tangent as compared to what Harrison was talking about with the major projects. One of our main features in Southwest Minnesota is a geologic feature called the Buffalo Ridge. And the Buffalo Ridge is the biggest and best wind regime in the upper Midwest. And so we've been involved as a Regional Development Commission in the economic development of wind energy since the 90s. So renewable energy is a big thing here. And so we were contacted a number of years ago to be a member of something called the Clean Energy Resource Teams. So we're one of the original partners there. And we do give what are called seed grants to projects just to kind of get some renewable energy things in the hopper so people can see what can be done and how that can affect things. So you got Viking Terrace here. We'll talk about that a little bit. When I started on the board, you had 2 or 3 financing partners to put together a project. I talked to Christy over at the Housing Partnership. The current project that they're working on, that I was working on with them, has 13 partners. So we share board members and staff to the LLP boards. So Christy, who's their chief operating officer, sits on our commission, and I sit on a bunch of their boards, and we kind of cross-pollinate, like Harrison had mentioned, between each other's boards and everything, so that we always kind of know what's going on with each other's agencies, even though we all serve such large areas and we don't see each other all the time like we used to. So we're going to concentrate here now then on the Westbrook Apartments. It's 24 units built in 76. And I mentioned earlier, a lot of the projects that we end up being involved in that are LLP projects are projects that have timed out of the Rural Development Program at USDA and have been acquired by the Housing Partnership. And so we've do the rehab, and then we end up being asked by USDA-RD if the Housing Partnership would own it. And of course, we have Lloyd Management does much of our property management, so we have contracts with them. The Housing Partnership also has a construction management arm, which is also located in our building. So the construction guys do a lot of work with us. And just because we're the rural area, one of the construction managers is married to my finance director. So we got like to keep everything in house. All right, so you can see the Westbrook Apartments. As a search coordinator and search partner, we gave the Housing Partnership money for a seed grant, and the grant funds, there were $16,000 available to look at 2 multifamily projects within the portfolio to see if whether air source heat pumps could lower the energy costs and increase the comfort. Grant funds were used to commission an energy study, which was done by CCM engineers. You can see there, that's the cover. And they did that as a multi-tenant housing study. All right, so then the answer was yes, we could do it, but there wasn't enough funding available to actually do individual units within the multifamily unit or multifamily building. So between the rental rehab deferred loan program, the state housing tax credit at Minnesota Housing, what we did do is put fresh air systems in the common areas and heat pumps in the entry areas. So that cut the energy footprint for the buildings a huge amount, at least in half probably. And so as we go forward on some of these projects, and I had earlier slides, some of those pictures, those were all projects that are green. And so, like I said, energy efficiency, renewable energy, access to renewables is a big deal in our region. And so the Housing Partnership working those into their construction and into their rehab, and then using some of our connections in the renewable energy world has been a real positive growth area for both of our agencies. All right, so questions, answers, observations. I went through that kind of fast. In the interest of time here, I think we're right on schedule. It looks like we got about 20 minutes left. That's I think what I promised Andrew we'd have left for questions at the end. So
yeah,
thank you for your time.
Yeah, great stuff. Great to see just kind of the connection y'all have made, not only just being in the same building, but again, kind of interweaving, some of those financial contract missions. And, I think that's kind of the biggest thing that I'm kind of taking away from this is the opportunity for both, organizations with common purposes, common goals in mind, to just really get together and figure out the best ways they can work together. I think it's as simple as that. So thank you, Jay. I really appreciate it. I did, want to open it up here for questions. We've got plenty of time. So any questions for Harrison or Jay, anyone feel free to either post in the chat or come off mute and ask ask online. So anything anyone got? We've got some patient, shy people, so.
I just want to mention something really quick. This is Lisette Servin. I'm from Arizona. I'm in a border community, and I was totally impressed when when Jay said economic development, meaning people. I mean, that's totally different from us because economic development, we do need jobs. Talking about a border community that we're the second largest developer in town. The largest developer now is our current mayor, and we have developed this town. About 60% of this town has been developed by our organization. We've been here for, I want to say, close to 50 years. I've been working here for 8 years, but the organization has been in the community close to 50. So we have developed about 60% of the town. And our housing, it's booming. We are one of the fastest growing community in Arizona. And housing is like a great demand, and we're here for that. But we do need investors to come to town for jobs. I mean, the jobs that we have here, it's either you work in a school as a teacher, you work at the border, CBP, or we have a state prison. We have a private prison, a state prison. And in the vast majority of our jobs here come from agricultural. We have a lot of people crossing the border daily to work in the fields. So that's pretty much the type of jobs that we have. But people keep asking for jobs in our community, and it's another issue that we have too. It's land. We do have a lot of land in town, but a lot of the land is state land and federal land. So we recently acquired about 7.8 acres of state land to develop a new small subdivision, a combination of apartment, multifamily, and townhomes. So we're working on that. We're working the concept design. So when it comes to housing, I think we're a genius, and along working with our mayor. But jobs, I mean, what we're looking for is how to bring jobs into our community and buying that land so we can encourage businesses to come to town, because we don't. I think you mentioned you have about 2.5 jobs for every person. I think that's what you mentioned. I was like, wow, I wish we could have that here, but I mean, it's different. Every rural community goes through different challenges, and I just want to say that we're there. We're in the fight. So I was impressed when I hear that, because that's nothing that you hear in our area. So kudos to you on that end. And then for us, I mean, I'm trying to learn as much as I can and seeking more ideas or strategies to make it work. I mean, I work here, and I'm also a city council member. I was recently elected, and I'm also a city official. So I'm trying to see what the city is doing and then what we do. So trying to work together, and this is great. I mean, it's been working well. So far so good. And I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lizette. It's great to hear. And it's
Thank
kind of, the jobs and houses, it's chicken and the egg in a lot of ways,
Yes.
building communities. So definitely recommend, reaching out to, the Arizona Department of Commerce. I'm sure they have some great resources available to how y'all can maybe plug into some of the private resources and funding streams that are available in Arizona. So thank you. And it looks like Kylie has a hand up. Kylie Milliken. Yes.
Can you all hear me? I've been having some tech issues today.
Yep, you're good. Yep.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, I'm Kylie. I work at FAHI, and we're a CDFI and a membership organization in Appalachia. We focus on affordable housing development. And I was just wondering if Harrison and Jay could talk a little bit more about like the economic argument for housing. So like, what are you all hearing from funders? What are they paying attention to? What sorts of like narrative strategies have you all been putting into place over the last few years?
Sure. I'll jump in. It's actually interesting because it kind of piggybacks off of a bit of what Lizette was just saying, in that we have had we've had municipalities in northern New Hampshire who were trying to bring large scale employers to the region, who kind of at the end of the day said, actually, we're looking somewhere else because we feel there's inadequate housing here to meet what our employment needs will be. So so it's great to hear that in Arizona they're doing the housing piece. Now it sounds like they've got to do the recruiting piece for the businesses, which is tricky in its own way. But so we use that certainly as a conversation piece. Another piece, like kind of as I mentioned, that we use when it comes to how is housing and economic development connected, is just when you talk to those, we go and talk to the major employers, but we make sure also when we find in our rural space, the major employer is always healthcare. And so our hospitals tend to be our first point of contact when we go into a community if we're looking for an employer. And it's conversations around the fact that, the birthing center was shut down, 4 years ago. Why did that happen? We couldn't retain OBGYNs, due to housing constraints and things of that nature. So it's finding, what are the pain points within the community? So it's broadening it outside of just specifically economic and looking more at, the economic conversation that I think Jay was touching on too, which is how do we get people to live and stay in this area? Because that is the economy. Like economy, you don't find economies out in the wild, right? Like they're very much a domesticated thing. They require people to keep them up. And so we have kind of tied that together and saying, let's not talk about workforce, let's just talk about the people. If you peel back housing as an issue, do you still have an issue with getting people to come and live in your area? Is it because of the school system? Is it because of lack of healthcare or food access? Is it because of lack of recreation? And so we have kind of taken all of that and spun it together in that, there is no one problem. It's a multifaceted thing, and we have to be elevating all of them collectively in order to make sure that we kind of are setting a level playing field economically. So that has been how we've been approaching it. And I hope that is helpful. And if it's not, I apologize for wasting your time.
No, that was great. Thank you so much.
And one thing I would add to that conversation, we were recently in Durango, Colorado, on a site visit last week through a different NADO program, and was talking to the city of Durango's economic development program manager, kind of just about the general struggles they're having as a resort mountain town, very popular in the summers for mountain biking and hiking, and then also in the winter for skiing and snowboarding and winter sports activities. And they have such an influence or influx and outward migration depending on the seasons around the outdoor recreation. And every single thing they mentioned was about how housing is the #1 focus of their economic development department, because every single aspect that makes Durango a fun place to visit is supported by people who need to work there and support those industries. So everyone down from the ski lift operators in the winter, they need a place to stay that's not 2.5 hours, 3-hour drive away every day, all the way to the people in the coffee shops on the downtown drag. They need to find a place close in to live and to work. And then, also lots of different aspects about community building and building places that people want to live went into those conversations. So I think especially in those really high demand housing markets like resort towns, people are starting to wake up to that idea that every person that supports their local economy deserves a place to live and a place in their community. So that's a great question. Thank you for bringing that up, Kylie. Jay, anything to add on that?
I was thinking specifically about some of our smaller communities, and I'd mentioned broadband access. Our smallest county has about 4,600 people in it. And so maybe 2 years ago now, they used their wind energy production tax money to give broadband to their entire county. So everybody has the ability to have access to broadband. And what that does is it targets some of the communities where we have excess infrastructure. So we have smaller communities that have built infrastructure that they're not utilizing, that you could put housing on without having to develop new infrastructure. And as anybody who's developed one of these projects knows, the cost to run in water and sewer and power to green space is enormous. So why not see if we can't find a way to attract people to where we have excess infrastructure already built and put the housing there. And one of the things that we've been kind of targeting is the availability of broadband to bring people who could work remotely and still have a very affordable place to live, because a lot of the initial costs have already been incurred.
And Jay, if I can, to that point on the rural broadband, probably 8 years ago, I think now, I had worked through USDA and through EPA, especially USDA's Rural Utility Service, their efforts in rural broadband. I had worked with some rural communities around the country, in communities who had gotten broadband through whatever means. It had many different stories, each community. However, once they had that, it was really working with a very broad range of stakeholders in those communities, from the Chamber of Commerce to your economic development folks, to your housers, to your business folks, all of that, of saying, how can we market these communities? So factoring in tourism, employment, and saying, how can we really get the word out there that we are a remote place that people can come enjoy. The quality of life was a really big piece. Natural resource and quality of life are the two pieces that these communities were using to market themselves who had broadband. And this was before COVID. So when COVID hit, the fact that so many people fled urban areas to go and live in these very popular, what we would call outdoor recreation gateway communities, was something that, yes, in 2016, 2017, that, several of us have been working on, and USDA really sees the value in that. And I think COVID did bring such an expansion in rural broadband, and a knowledge that it was completely it is still completely inadequate in large swaths of the country, and trying to improve that. So I really applaud the efforts to sort of think holistically as a whole community of how can we use that and sell our community as a place that people want to come, or want to come back if they have left to raise their families.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah and Jay. Great points. We do still have time for a few more questions. Hope that was helpful for you, Kylie, and love the work that Fahey does across Appalachia. So thank you for being here. All right, folks. Well, thanks again for coming today. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up if no more questions are out there. But we will have the slides and recordings and everything sent out to everyone. We will also include Jay and Harrison and Sarah and myself's contact information. So please don't hesitate to reach out given any opportunity. I would love to personally connect you with any of our members or economic development districts around the country that may be working in your region. And I know Sarah feels the same way about all the NeighborWorks affiliates. So definitely want to make sure we can get as many of y'all working together as we can. And thanks again to our speakers today, Harrison and Jay. Great job. Really wish you all the best and wish your regions the best. So with that, we'll go ahead and log off. And thanks again to everyone for attending.
Thank you all.